Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. For us, it is a pleasure to receive you, and it is a great pleasure to be here back in Fundación Telefónica with our round tables that are so enriching and necessary. Today we have a great round table. We have been eager to organize it. It was one of our first decisions as organizers when we met last year at the Festival of Sarajevo. We went up to Iris to be able to invite her to this roundtable on the equity best practices in the AV productions. She's a true guru for women in Europe. She's a great professional. She has lots of followers, and for us it is a great honor to have her here. She is the joint director of the Austrian Cinematography Institute and president of the work group on gender and inclusion from the government of Austria. We also have Fernando, Bigeriego, deputy director of promotion of the Institute for Cinematography and AV Arts. And we have Lise Perrotet, coordinator of the Lab Femmes de Cinéma from France. It is a really interesting organization that promotes cinema and also carries out assessments with regard to the participation of women in the film industry. I would really love to hear about your experience and your assessments also. And finally, Alexia Muñoz, a great friend, a collaborator of the festival from the north of Spain, Galicia. She is the director of the European Women's Audiovisual Programs. She speaks many languages. We always meet in different cities of Europe, and she's one of the best professionals in this sphere here in Spain. So it is great to have these great, renowned professionals here with us.
Happy with your presence here. Thank you. Very honored.
Thank you very much, Carlota, for this great and passionate introduction. It is an honor to be here for the third time, I believe. Since 2019, it was the first time that I came to this festival, and I think that it is amazing to have this long festival, 10-day festival with great films, with renowned professionals, offering the public of Madrid this incredible selection of very different films so that we can reach many audiences. I'm going to be talking here as a filmmaker, as the director of the European Women's Audiovisual Network. We have luxury roundtable. I will make the introductions one by one, but before I wanted to set the context. What is the situation in the film industry and how have things evolved lately? The National Cinematography Award was given to Maria Zamora. Last year it was Carla Simón, Penelope Cruz in 2022. Isabel Coixet, 19, Josefina Molina, Esther García, 2018, and 2016, Ángela Molina. These might seem to be many women in the last editions, but in the 32 previous editions, there had only been 7 women, so we are compensating things a little bit. The same we can say about international festivals. This year in the Berlinale, Emma Diop's film won, 2022 Carla Simón, pero en total, and these editions, 75 editions, only a few women have been awarded. Cannes, 2023, Justine Triet, Julia de Cotreau the previous year, and then the Campion in the previous one. Venice, Laura Potras, 2022, Audrey Duran, but only 7 women in 81 editions. And San Sebastian, Women have started being awarded during the last decade, but only during the last decade. 5 women out of 72 editions in Spain. For the last 20 years, we have been fighting for a greater visibility for women, more opportunities, positive measures, balance of budgets with regard to women's projects. And after many years, many projects, many laws, many projects from the ICA, according to this year's report, the representation of women in the AV sector in important positions, 2023 amounts to 38%. And this is a great progress. Every year we have an additional 1 or 2% more, but 38% is less than half. If we look at intermediate positions, screenplay has the most women, 35%, production, assembly, 30%, composition, special effects, 30%, an incredible increase in the last years. Direction, one of the most important ones, 29%, an important increase, 9 points. Sound, 24%, and photography director, 19%. So these are the figures that we can be proud of. 10 years ago, the figures were completely different, but if we're pretty happy that we have opened up a way and we have incentives and measures that promote larger involvement of women in important positions in the film industry, we have to thank institutions for this, and then we will hear from the ICAA what they have been implemented during the last 2 years.
Our guest, it is Zappe-Heller, since Austria is the country of honor this year. It has a degree in French and Spanish, by the Faculty of Philosophy from the Vienna Universität, masterclass in advertisement and sales, and she joined the Austrian Film Institute in 1993. She was the coordinator of the Media Desk, Austria, and Austrian representative at Eurimage. In 2011, she became the deputy director of the Austrian Film Director, dealing with the gender affairs since 2013, a department that she created, with a full package of measures, incentives, reports, script competition. She chaired the Eurimage Gender Equality Working Group, attended the 2015 Sarajevo Conference. Esta fue una conferencia importante donde se...
This was an important conference that launched many initiatives in gender equality. It was signed, there was an agreement signed in August 2015. It was during the presidency of Bosnia of the European Union. And from then onwards, Eurimage and other institutions started implementing more measures.
Of European Film Agency Directors and Gender Inclusion Working Group in 2018, where she took over chairmanship in 2021. It is, I know, I admire your work a lot. I know you've been a supporter of gender equity, and you have implemented in Austria amazing measures that we are here to listen and then to debate, discuss, and compare with what we're doing in Spain. So I leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me here at this amazing festival. And I really have to stress this point, because even though we have quite a lot of measures done or doing measures for women in Austria, we don't have Women's Film Festival, a festival dedicated to women, which is really a pity. But we won't stop working on things, so maybe I will come back in a couple of years with better news in this behave. It's really amazing when you see these trailers of those films, the wide range women are doing. It's amazing, and I really would love to just go to the cinema and watch them all. But allow me to start with a question where the whole thing started for us. I just put it like it is. Can film change the world? I'm afraid not as simple as that, but I'm sure that films can do something. Because film is such a powerful medium, reuniting all other art forms in one, and therefore getting straight to our hearts if it's well done, getting us emotional. And therefore film can hinder or foster change in society, and this is something we really do need. I don't want to mention the US disaster, but it's done. So this was maybe the basis of our thinking within the Austrian Film Institute. And just to mention, the Austrian Film Institute is the equivalent to the ICA here in Spain, meaning we are the national funding body, funding only feature-length cinema movies and giving away 100% taxpayers' money. So, in 2013, we had this meeting with quite a lot of other film institutions. And with us has been our former colleague from Sweden, Anna Serna. She was the one who started.
A rock star, pioneer.
The rock star, yes, absolutely. She started the whole gender thing. She just asked us, what do you think? What is going on in your respective countries? And we were all sitting there and saying, wow, it's fine. She smiled at us and said, go home and start counting. Okay, and this is what we did in 2013. And in 2016, we had the very first gender report. This gender report was, of course, not the very first time that anybody in Austria tried to publish figures on gender inequality. We have an association of women in the audiovisual field called FC Gloria, which is the equivalent to your CIMA. And they always try to publish figures, but as soon as they were public, everybody contested the figures. Is this really 4% or shouldn't it be 4 point anything? So we were talking about the figures and not about the fact. But the film gender report, the first Austrian film gender report changed completely. For the very first time, we did speak about the fact that there is a gender inequality and we have to do something about this. So, the first finding of the first Austrian film gender report from 2016 was, for me it was very important to hear that, and this goes for all the films that were analyzed, male-dominated film crews show a male world, whereas female film crews show a more equal, a more realistic picture. And this is what we are looking for. And we were thinking, what can we do? Within the different heads of departments, there were a lot of female technicians missing. And so we installed what we call the gender incentive. This is a measure that aims to production companies, to producers, because their job is to look for money. And there is a money carrot here. Meaning, if you have a project that gets production funding from our side, from the Film Institute, and there are working a lot of women in different heads of departments, this production company gets another 30,000 euro for the development for next projects where women are in the key positions. The key positions are production, direction, and script writing. So, of course, this is a system that starts quite slowly because they didn't know where to find these women, and the projects were not on their desks. But meanwhile, so it started in 2017, and meanwhile, till today, 110 new female-driven projects are on their way within this system. So today we have this third Austrian film gender report, and I brought you some printed out versions because it's not even online, the English summary of it.
Es una primicia, es una primicia, no está ni online.
Please feel free to get them. And one of the findings in this report is that women are still underrepresented in technical departments, unfortunately.
Someone has to put it written. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it is a fact. I have to say that within this system, the gender incentive system, all those departments that are getting points within the system raised. But unfortunately, in the technical departments, the women are still underrepresented, meaning in lighting, there are 8%. In the former reports, it was 0, so I think there is one female person working in the lighting meanwhile. In sound, it's 14%, and camera, 20%. And the camera hurts the most, I think, because the camera is the vision. It's the gaze. And we would need so much more women behind the camera. I'm looking to you, Laura. But I have to say that from the beginning of our research till today, we started with 10% of camera women, and now it's 20%. So it is a race, but it's still not enough. And of course, male crews are working a lot less with female camera persons. Just 9% of them were working with women. Female crews were at 30%. But this is quite a new finding, and we have not found a tool to work against this, but we are working on it. I was mentioning before that women show more often independent female characters. How do we know this? There is a very, very simple test. Probably all of you do know it. It's the Bechdel-Wallace test. Just to mention it very briefly, there are 3 questions to be asked. Are there at least 2 women in this film talking to each other about something else than a man? And it's really amazing. Once you start...
Es un test, es muy...
This is like a game. It's something that you can easily do, but with this you can realize the low representation of women in many movies. There are no 2 women who have a character with a name and who are not talking about the man in the movie. This might look very silly, but it gives us a clear idea.
Stop. We started to do the inclusion check, which is a measure taken into account several tests that has been developed, and this is a tool for our selection committee. So this is done on the scripts that are presented to us. So it is the Bechdel-Wallace test. It's the Marco-Mori test, which goes a little bit beyond, meaning this test is looking if these female characters have an own arc of development on their own, or are they just supporting the male character? Then there is the Chavez-Perez test, having a look on diversity, asking the question, are there more than two non-white persons in the film talking to each other about something else than a crime? So a very simple test, but it hurts when you start doing it, but it's a fact. And there are things measured in a very sophisticated way. I have to say it has been elaborated for years now. It has a look on gender equality, on diversity. It has a look if there is no sexism in this script and no discrimination. And by the end, when they do all those tests and all those analyses, you get a graph. And with one side you can tell where is the weakness or the strength in this script on behalf of gender equality and diversity. That's the only thing these tests are judging. They are not judging the quality of the script. And there are two more points that I think are really important. Is intimacy coordination needed, and is a sensitivity reading needed? Intimacy coordination goes much more beyond sex scenes. For those kind of scenes, of course, they are 100% necessary, but there are a lot of other intimate scenes that need a choreography too. And the sensitivity reading, of course, if it's dealing with sensitive, or if it's talking about underrepresented groups, and these groups have not been involved in the script, this analysis shows that it would be needed to do so. In the beginning, I told you, no, I did not tell you, because in 2013, when we started to count, the output was, we had, in 2016, we had a quarter of female directors, which was not that bad for that time, but they got only 12% of the money. So, gender equality means the money has to be shared equally. Of course, the very easy response to this would be quota. Every time I mentioned this word, everybody shouted out, where is the quality? But the good thing is the gender reports showed, and all of them showed it, female-driven films are more often invited to festivals and get more awards, which means the quality is there. And we were really lucky because our board of management was very open for gender measures. And today we have in our guidelines a gender budgeting. We started in 2021, and this was a plan where to get within 3 years. And the good thing was, after 2 years, so by the end of 23, we were at 51% of the money given to female-driven films. But, unfortunately, there is always a but. By the end of this year, 24, we were at 49, which is nice, but it's not 50. So this tells us that we really have to stick to keep our eyes on it and to keep on with this gender budgeting.
Yes, gender budgeting and keep on the reporting, because it's the only way to really to sustain these initiatives and really show and brag of your awesome results, because good results must be really spread so that your good actions can be imitated and replicated everywhere.
I would like to mention one more point, because I think this is really a very important thing. As all European and beyond Europe countries, Austria was involved into Me Too issues. And therefore, we felt obliged to write a code of ethics. Frankly speaking, when I first was involved in, and I saw the very first drafts, I say, oh no, this is a how to behave thing. There are things written there like, don't shout at each other when you are working with each other, which should be really a normal thing. But I think film is really something special, something, the fact that people are so close for a very short time, it doesn't follow normal rules. And so we did this code of ethics, and I think the most important thing is that we made very clear that the responsibility that everything is fine, that everybody is fine on set and during the whole production process lies 100% with the producers. And if there is really something going wrong and the producer is not reacting, we will ask our money to be paid back. And all the other funds, because we are speaking to each other, all the other funds will do the same, and the TV station in Austria will do the same too. So I think there is not a single company in Austria that would survive. And therefore, they are on board, and we are working closely together. And within this code of ethics, we are asking for trainings before shooting.
Like in France?
Yes. It's a little bit about
like in, the producer has to.
Absolutely, but it's not only for the producer; it's for the whole crew.
Okay.
The whole crew should be here, should be there. We are working on standards because, for the time being, it's everybody does a little bit what everybody feels okay, but we want standards. We really will have standards. And of course, this does not apply only for film crews, this applies for ourselves too. So we are giving trainings to our board members, to the members of our selection committees, and of course to our staff. And this code of ethics has recently been added by a child youth protection part, which is really important. So just to give you an outlook, the new fields we will be dealing with in the future times is, of course, diversity, equal chances. We are working with the Hamburg Film Fund, who is elaborating a data collection system, because this is very sensitive, much more sensitive than the data collection within the binary gender equality thing. And so it has absolutely to be anonymous, and it has to be on a voluntary basis. And of course, networking is absolutely crucial.
It is, in this business particularly.
Yes, absolutely, and this is why we are very closely working together with the EFAD, so the Association of Film Funders in Europe, and with Eurimage, the funding body from the Council of Europe, and of course with festivals like el Festival por Mujeres. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Iris, por esta.
Thank you, Iris, for this summary. You can check out the report. It's incredible. It's very detailed, and it states very clearly that if measures and incentives are applied, you get results. This is working in Austria. This is working in Spain. Now we need to see how we can sustain these incentives and these initiatives, and how these can be sustained throughout the next 10, 15 years.
Pasamos ahora a Fernando Bigeriego, subdirector de Fomento.
We're going to move on to Fernando Bigeriego, who is the Deputy Director of the Institute of Cinematography and Audiovisual Arts, the ICAA. He has also worked within the Ministry of Culture, and he just landed in the field of cinema in 2024. After what Iris has told us, we would like to hear you brag about what you're doing in this last year. Many movies have been made by women in Spain, and the data that we see from the CIMA report are quite positive. We are improving year after year, and we trust the ICAA to keep on improving and to go as far as Austria and even beyond that. Thank you so much for your presentation, Alexia, and thank you also to the Festival Film by Women for the invitation, and also for the kind offer by Espacio Fundación Telefónica for letting us have this conversation here. It is important to have this debate about how we walk towards equity in the AV production. As Alexia was saying, I am the Deputy Director of the ICAA. For those of you who do not know this institute, this is an autonomous body depending on the Ministry of Culture. It's the Institute of Cinematography and Audiovisual Arts, and we are in charge of implementing the public policies for the protection and promotion of the cinema industry. In my case, and within my subdirectorate, we are in charge of many things, but above all, we take care of the funds and aids for production. To give you some context and background for this, we have 4 different lines of aid for audiovisual production that we have every year, 2 for featured films and 2 for short films. One of them is for films that have already been shot, and the rest are aids for projects of films. We enter in the development and project phase with the funding. And this year, for the global aids for featured films, which is the one that is aimed at films that have greater commercial potential. It has been established with 62 million euro, and the selective aids are aimed at featured films that are mostly devoted to the author creation. This is related to documentaries and new movie makers. This has been for 30 billion euros. And we have also another line of budget that adds up to almost 100 million euro. This leads me to talk about the promotion of gender equity within all these lines. We have a quota, a share for all these budgets that I just mentioned. The global aids line has 35% of the budget reserve is aimed at projects that are made by women, directed by women. In the rest of the 3 lines that I've mentioned, the aids for selectively chosen films and short films, we have 40% that is reserved to projects exclusively made by women. And we also have the Next Gen funds, which is the plan that was set up by the European Union to help the countries after the pandemic. These production subsidies come from the Next Gen funds, what we have called in Spain the NECP project in Spain. And in the general aids, 10 million came from the Next Gen funds. This money can only be devoted to animation films or projects that have been directed by women movie makers, because these are the 2 lines of work that comply with the purposes of the Next Gen funds, that is devoted to digitization on the one hand and gender equality on the other. We also have several points that are given for the female participation in the projects. In the global aids line, this is based on objective criteria that are published In an annex to the call every year, you have a score of 0 to 100. In order to get the aid, you at least need to have 70 points, and the aids are granted depending on the score that you receive following this criteria. When it comes to the other 3 lines of aids, the procedure is different because we have an objective scoring criterion and a subjective one that is in the hands of 14 people or 14 judges who this tribunal that makes this decision is made up of 50% women, 50% men, and they come to their own conclusions. And this is also part of the scoring for awarding these grants. This is from the global aids, where you see that 8 points are given in all the calls for the presence of women in the project. 3 if we're talking about the movie maker, 2 for the screenwriter, executive producer 1, and the music composer also grants 1 point. Then you have another 3 points if you have other managerial positions occupied by women, for instance, DOP, etc. And you have an extra point in case of the movie making and the script writing are in the hands of women as well. For all these criteria, you need to have only women's presence, except in the script writing or the screenwriting, and where a man and a woman can partner for the writing of the script. If we can go back a little bit, I would like to highlight that these are grants that are given per project. So when the request is made, the producer receives a certain score, 8 if they comply with all the requirements. And normally, the name of the filmmaker is already known, the screenwriter's name is also known, and all the technical positions are already assigned. But when we assess the awarding of the grant, we know that there are many circumstances that may force that one of the people who are going to be involved in the production does not participate in the project. So in this case, in order for the project not to lose their scoring, they need to replace one woman with another. And this is something that we need to check later on in the stage where we get all the credits for the movie. If we realize that there are not the women that were supposed to be participating in the project in the end, we will remove the awarded points, and we will need to the project. The people in charge of the project need to return the money that they have been given. Also, they could do a reimbursement if they comply with some of the criteria. There is a commitment for these criteria to be respected until the movie is released. I will give you some examples of the projects that we have funded from the ICAA, where the movie makers were women, and this includes the selective aids. For instance, in the case of Las Chicas Están Bien, the girls are all right, or Nevenka's movie, animation movies. You can see all sorts of movies who have been very well received by the public. If I may, Fernando, you can see that the points that can be awarded these are 8 points awarded for female participation, but out of 100. So this is an incentive. This is a grant. So we moved from 8% of DOPs to 19 DOPs. We have had photography directors of photography who had received many awards, Goya awards, even thanks to these incentives. And it's still only 8 points out of 100. I just wanted to make this very clear. So, indeed, we are going to see the results of all these actions. This is a graph that I got from This is a graph that I got from a report made by an organization of females and women in the movie industry. This gives us a lot of information, and it clarifies this matter enormously. We're talking about projects or beneficiaries who have received grants, both of the global types of aids and the selective ones. There were several, there was a 41% of projects directed by women, with screenwriters around 40% as well. And the production, we can see that we go up to 80% of women producers.
Productora ejecutiva.
Productora ejecutiva.
Que es
Executive producers, which is quite a tricky and sticky subject. So we're not going to talk about that now. These graphs are from 2023, and we are going to see the evolution in the coming years from 2018 to 2023. I have given you the picture of the reserves that we have for the calls this year, and the scoring of this year, but we have been including more and more women's positions in the scoring, and also the budget reserve has grown from 35–40%. This was incorporated in 2020. So as you can see there is a big leap forward in 2020 of the projects that were directed by women. From 2018, we have moved to up to 42%. That went down a little bit last year, down to 37%. Since 2018, we started with 23% and got to 51% in some lines of aid. And as you can see, there is more women's presence in the selective aids than in the global aids. This is also related to the projects of women being awarded, receiving many awards, and this is much more connected to the selective aids, which is where we see that there is a stronger women's presence. These are also projects that are smaller in terms of the budget that they require. So we can see again this graph from the THEMA report, which is very clarifying. In black, you can see the average budget of the movies that have been receiving grants directed by men, and in red you can see the ones that have been directed by women. As you can see, there is quite a remarkable gap between the projects directed by women that receive about 1.5 million euro on average, and the projects directed by men go up to 3 million in budget. So there is, in fact, a gap, and we have information that there are things to do still. This is why we need the ICAA to implement this budget quota, so that those things that we cannot achieve to obtain big budgets to produce these movies, these films, this needs to be provided by the ICAA. Well, what we're going to do is to establish this acknowledgement of the costs, and this is the last graph that I wanted to show you, which comes from the cinematographic statistics that we publish every year. And here we see different things. These are not beneficiaries of aids, but instead this is the total Spanish production figures. So from 2019 to 2023, we moved from 265 projects to 375. This is this might be the topic for another debate, but this is the increase in the global national production. So we should go to the percentages, and we see that in this period, there has been an increase in the number of projects directed exclusively by women from up to 24%, coming from 17.7%, and with the script only written by women from 18.9% to 20%. So these measures are not only reflected in the projects that are directed by women, but they also spread towards other projects. And we are establishing this sort of fabric where there is a stronger female presence in all roles within the filmmaking projects. And just to finish, I would like to say something about something that we do from the directorate. We take care of classifying the movies by range of ages. This is something, this classification that we do, for instance, not allowed for minors below 18 years old or below 16 years old. There is an expert panel that is in charge of deciding these categories. And this can also take into account the promotion of gender equality, or, for instance, the fact that there are non-stereotypical image of women that is portrayed in the movies, and this also acknowledges the contents of these types of movies, or all movies. And the short movies that have this symbol that you see on the screen have 5 extra points, and this is another push so that they can have access to the funding. There are many things more to tell, but I'll leave it at that.
Fernando.
Thank you, Fernando. This important work carried out by ICAA means more films directed by women with more presence in festivals, in San Sebastián, in Cannes, etc. And all of this brings more wealth, more diversity, more points of view, and more inclusion. And we still have a long way ahead. We're now going to talk to Lise Perrotet. Dear Lise.
And run tables throughout Europe. Lise is a general coordinator of Le Lab Film de Femmes, which is a great initiative born from the Les Arts Film Festival. And they do, well, she will explain what they do, but it's amazing. Their qualitative research studies and their point of view on everything. She has a master in management, and she did a research about women representation in films by Studio Ghibli. So she's really a feminist, and she has an eye for this gender perspective. And she arrived to the movies, or to the film sector, through the feminism. She's always looking for distinctive, unique female characters who bring more diversity and plural representation in order to change mentality and society. I'm quoting from her. Well, translating, it's a translation. So, Lise, thank you very much for being here. And well, after the initiatives and measures by the Austrian Film Institute and ICA, I would like to know your expertise and the point of view of Le Lab. Please, I give the floor to you.
And thank you so much for having me here, for having this moment, because this festival is so important, and those round tables talking about parity, about mixity, it's always so important to keep this moment on the agenda. So thank you so much. So the Lab Femme de Cinéma, it's a think tank, an association working on parity and mixity in cinema and in the audiovisual field. We have different kinds of actions in order to promote equality in the sector of cinema, but our main, one of the main actions that I'm going to present right now, it's that we are doing a study, a qualitative study on the place of women in European cinema. So it was created in 2016 because at the time, just like Iris said, there is no figure, almost no figure at the European level. So when we decided to create this study, the idea was to understand what was going on in Europe regarding parity. And since we were trying to calculate the figures for the different countries, we said, why not? We can also ask them if they are implementing measures in order to improve their figures. So that was created then, and it was really, at the time we were quite alone doing that, and we were trying to be as professional as we could, but now we are not doing the figures anymore since the European Audiovisual Observatory is doing the figures, so we are only focusing on the qualitative part, and now we are in partnership with EFAD, we're in partnership with Eurimage, and now we have a real European recognition. More and more institutes answer to our solicitation each year. So our methodology is that each year we ask the different film institutes, such as ICA and the Austrian Film Institute. So we're used to talking to each other for our study. We asked them some really precise questions regarding the measures they are implementing in policy in order to promote parity in their industry. So our study is kind of a benchmark of what's going on in Europe, a state of play, but it's also a collection of good practices. And some institutes, they told us that they can go through our study to find some ideas to implement in their own countries. And it's also the time that, since it's a study that we're doing each year the institutes have to collect everything they have been doing, and it's a good way to put their effort in perspective with what's going on in the other countries. And just a quick, because we had the figures, we know that it's important to keep on following the measures, but why is this so important? Because when we started looking at the figures, if we look at the share of women in European cinema in Europe in 2012, we were around 19% of film directed by women. In 2022, we're around 22.5%. If this figure keeps evolving at the same speed as during those two periods, we will achieve parity in 2080. So in more than 60 years, this is crazy. That's why the institutes, that's why it's so important that the measures are taken, because we don't want to wait this long to have a more inclusive industry. So, giving the main trends of the last couple of years, the institutes are I'm going to give you 5 or 6 main trends of the measures that are taken. First, the institutes are working in promoting diversity in a broader sense, and parity is being a part of a more inclusive policies for a lot of centers. For the last couple of years, another trend is that the institutes are fighting against gender-based violence. This is very important because one of the reasons of the lack of parity is because of violence that are sometimes happening on sets or in the different industries, in the different companies. Another trend is that the quotas are not very popular, sadly, in the different film industry. This is a bad example because we have this is unique. It's like the best students are here. Like it's the Austrian Film Institute and the ICA, those who are two of the institutes that are implementing a lot of measures, and each year it's a real pleasure to have their updates, because you know that there will be new things and some very deep policies and in the long term. But quotas, it's only only soft quotas, that is to say that if you have 2 projects, one led by a woman, one led by a man, you will pick the project led by a woman, but this is very subjective since it's based on equal quality. But the hybrid quota and the hard quota, it's only about 4 countries, and the soft quota, it's around 10 countries, so that's quite low. Another trend is that a lot of institutes are implementing measures in order to help those who are parents and are working in the industry. It is not directly linked to women, but in the heterosexual couples, when you have a children, it tends to be more complicated for the women to keep on with their career, particularly in the film industry. And so some institutes are implementing measures in order to create more equal conditions of working in the industry. So that's some example of trends. Maybe there are other that I'm forgetting. Supporting parenting, as about parity in the application in the process. It's a way to make sensibilization for those who are applying. Develop support, career support for filmmakers, such as mentoring programs, such as formation, such as, this is also important because, just as you said, networking is important in the industry, and work on unconscious bias, just like you said, some film institutes are trying to question their selection committee and to talk them about the Bechdel test, and because it's important and it will have representation really matters, and we think with the images that we have, so it's really important. And something that was more in the previous years, it's the bonuses, the incentive in order to help women, such as the gender incentive. This is something that an increasing number of countries are implementing, and this is also very important because if you give a bonus, then the producers will try to have more feminine team because it's concretely linked to money. And so really quickly, the situation in France. The French Institute has kind of 3 main typology of actions. They're making a lot of study, and study is it's the very core of everything, because you cannot implement policies if you don't have the figures, if you cannot follow if it's evolving or not. So they're doing lots of studies, which is a good thing. They're also they created in 2019, thanks to an association called the 50/50 Collective, they created a bonus, a gender parity bonus, which is if you have on the head of the department parity, then the producer will have a 15% bonus. So that is working, because you can see that when the bonus was created, only 1 film out of 5 could have this bonus when it was created. Now, each year, it's around 1/3 of the film that can have the bonus. So it's a proof, again, with the figures, that the measures and the incentive, they have an impact. And the last thing about the French Institute is that they're trying to work on the fight against gender-based violence, because there's been a lot of problems and violence in French cinema. And so, for instance, if you want to have funding, the producer of the head of the producer company, they have to follow a mandatory training, and you cannot have the funding if the producer hasn't done this funding on gender-based violence, fighting gender-based violence. But there is still so much things to do. And so I think that's it with the kind of a presentation of what's going on at the European level and the French level.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's very important to have their qualitative version, let's say a qualitative report on the statistics and data provided by the European Observatory, which is called Numbers. So they really understand and explain and translate in order that the film funds, film agencies can really implement measure based on that. So I'm so excited because it seems that everything is glowing and shiny with these numbers, this 35% of the budget allocated to women from the ICA, the incentives in Austria. However, there's still lots of things to do. As Liz has mentioned, the harassment and sexual and gender-based violence, it's something that it has not been tackled in many institutes. So do you think that really institutes should go for that, suggesting workshops or having, let's say, like an intimacy coordinator, let's say a figure to monitor welfare in shootings? Or what do you think that institutes can do in order to prevent gender-based violence and harassment? Yes.
Well, I think as we are dealing with taxpayers' money, we do have a certain responsibility. Whom are we giving this money to, and what is done with the money, and is the environment people are working in, I don't even want to call it a safe workspace, but stories that are told and things that we heard are really unbelievable. And I think we have, of course, the Film Institute has the responsibility and has the duty to do something against it. This is why we have this code of ethics running, and I think there are quite a lot of institutions, of film institutes, doing the same thing, code of conduct, code of ethics, gathering the whole crew and making people aware of the fact that they should treat each other with respect.
Yeah, nicely and respectful.
And of course it has not, it shouldn't be linked to, limited to the time of the shooting. Of course it starts with casting.
And development phase, even.
Yes, yes.
And long
yes.
after hours meetings, development phase, yes.
Especially casting, but it doesn't stop when the film is shot, but it goes till the distribution.
Yeah, it's a problem we have to deal as a sector and a society in general.
Yeah.
It's the harassment, gender-based violence, and also this structure powers of power, that people with power feel they should be given what they want. Particularly, I tend to think people from older generations. I want to think that young generations, at least they have educated in a different world, but I don't know. ¿Qué nos tiene el ICA para esto?
En el ICA.
What about the ICAA? Well, we have launched about a month ago a unit called Prevention and Treatment with regard to sexist actions in the industry. It is led by a foundation. There is a phone number, there's an email that victims of sexist violence or witnesses can call if they've witnessed a potential sexist or violent situation. It can be verbal, it can be power abuse. It is also led to legal assistance, psychological support to try to help that person as best as possible, or refer her to other organizations, etc. I think it is an excellent measure. We will see the efficiency that it has, and also the responses associated to this data. If, well, unfortunately it is necessary and it has to be used. Well, if we don't want to see it, this is not going to solve it, right? There's an application called Call It by the founders of the Bernilal, and that is aimed at detecting the level of wellness welfare at shootings.
It's quite easy, pero a los productores no les gusta mucho.
But producers don't really like it. They think that they can be accused. There's a certain mistrust. But I think this is like an app, just like airports.
You check red, yellow, green, more or less. It's something, just a wake-up call, ¿no? Podría ser una señal de alarma, ir trabajando algo.
It's like a sign, right?
I just looked at the figures. 4 institutes were implementing measures in order to fight gender-based violence. In 2024, it's 21 institutes.
Of course.
So Me Too had a real impact, and the people that the people that have the courage to talk about what happened, and all the media, all the events dedicated to gender-based violence, it has an impact because the institute, they implement policy. And just as part of the lab, we're part in a group called Respect, just like you just said, who published yesterday their findings, and it's a group of professionals. We've been working since January on how to prevent gender-based violence from the first day of the writing to the very last tour of the team with the film or with the festival. And it's a document of 50 pages. It will be soon available in English, but it was made by professionals and we send it to the French Film Institute, and the French Film Institute is willing to work with us in order to try to implement some of the measures that have been, and we will send it to you in English.
Yes.
Of course, we're currently translating it, and we will send it. So it's funny because it was published yesterday, and you talked about respect. So we thought that it was a really sharp idea. It's about respect, and it's about respecting everyone. And a measure that is implemented in France is, for example, it is mandatory to have a referent harassment on set, which is a person who has another job on the set. It can be I don't know, the
mediator, or
yes, but it's someone who has who is employed on the film, for example, a script or a director of photography, and this person can also be a harassment referent. And so, if you have an issue on set, you are supposed to go talk to this person. But currently, this is mandatory, but the person does not have to be. Does not have to have followed a training, so which is kind of problematic because the person is not always. So some things are implemented, but there is so much more to.
I've heard mixed reviews of those workshops because, of course, theoretically is great. The producer takes this workshop, and then he explains this code of ethics to the crew. But some people said, okay, just tick that, and then you do as nothing. Sure. So that's why perhaps, another figure to check that everything is cool, is going on well, and could be.
And starting at the beginning of 2025, all of the crew members working on a film will have to follow a training, a first part online with the definition of harassment, aggression, all of this kind of definition, something really theoretical, and then on set they will have a training dedicated to the film, like what are the things that we have to be careful about when shooting this film. So this is also a great new policy, but again, we want so much more.
May I just ask one question? Because you were mentioning this person on set working in his or her job and being kind of an intermediate person. We were discussing this a lot. And of course, the production part was much in favor to have someone who is already part of the team because it's under their power. The creatives were more saying they would love to have someone who is independent, because to go to the producer, this would have been always a possibility, but was never used. Why? So an independent person to do that would be the ideal thing.
But it's always like the argument. It's always it would cost money. But in our report, we suggest that this person cannot be linked to the production. It cannot be the producer. It cannot be the director of production. It must be someone else, and it cannot be the director.
In a position below the line in the budget.
And we want to have two different people, because the idea is that you should feel safe, and so maybe choosing who you want to go talk to is also something that can be more helpful, because those referents, they exist, but lots of technicians, actresses, they told us we don't feel safe talking to these people. So, and this is something like on paper it's amazing, but on film set it doesn't always work.
And you know, you were just mentioning that it costs money to have this additional person. Yes, but stop shooting. This really costs money.
It is.
So.
That wasn't my argument.
Yeah, I know.
I would love that
yes,
someone independent come to the shooting.
I know. Yes, sorry, I know. Yeah.
Okay, I would like also to mention that, of course, these initiatives are very cool, but how about to sustain women's careers, which is the key thing in this business? For instance, this year, Marcol, one of the Spanish directors, has released her third film 15 years or 16 years after her first one. So sustaining a career is very complicated, particularly for women, because in the report done by Eva Network years ago, it was clearly seen that motherhood was a reason why women left the business, among other stuff. But yeah, having children and the complications about combining family and work. So how to sustain women's careers, because there are routes and incentives for new directors, but what happens when you want to do your third film? So how about thinking about new routes or mentoring programs? I read in your report that you have two mentoring programs, the Tandem and Pro.
Yeah, Tandem is not exactly a mentoring program. This is a program for women who are working as for the first or second time as head of departments, because you know these prejudging from the production side that a woman is more risky. It's more risky to take a woman.
The bias against women.
Yes. So it's more risky to have a woman as a first head of department than a man. I don't know why, but this is the fact.
Well, they used to say that women could not hold a camera.
Voila. And this Tandem program is offering a woman who is working for the first or second time as a head of department, offering 5,000 euro, and she can choose whomever she wants to get her over her very first weaknesses, insecure things. And this should be a reason for producers to get rid of this bias.
Okay.
So a very simple tool.
So that goes for head of departments, for the technical positions.
Yes.
And the
for all
technical.
Not only technical, could be in production, could be in even in script writing, could be everywhere. Yes, just to
so
get
even for line
people,
producers
this
as well.
This is for people for women to get started or to come back. Into business.
That's very important.
After a long pause. Yeah.
It's just important to do the comeback.
Yes.
As sustaining careers. Yeah, but for what I've seen, mentoring is really crucial. So keep incentives for also third films, for films, and also some kind of mentoring programs or mentoring workshops that institutions can do, and that the Pro goes like that.
Well, FC Gloria, this equivalent to the CIMA, has a regular mentoring program, and then there is Pro, which is just focusing on production, because like in Spain, we are really lacking female producers, and this is a problem. So we are training, we're giving this very tailor-made training program to women working in production.
Yeah, and even perhaps being the entrepreneurial positions, being the CEO of their companies, which is the thing here. Because when you are the CEO, I mean, you are the full responsible of the project. And as there are many reports that say also that when women really lead the project from every aspect, producer, director, writer, they usually tend to hire more women.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
There are figures.
Yeah, there are lots of figures. Yeah, from the University of Santa Monica or California. From the Gina Davis
Lots of different
Institute.
studies.
Okay.
En el caso de nuestro del
In the case of the ICAA, it is not only about supporting female careers, but also male directors' careers, and those that have a committee with regard to supports and aids. And it is important that members value the fact that it is a second or third film supporting maybe a director that has already made a first film, and to make sure that that person will have continuity and supporting that person in more projects, regardless of the gender of that filmmaker. In terms of technical staff at the Ministry of Culture, recently they have been working on the Statute of Artists for professionals who work in the field of culture, so that they include not only creators but also technicians and other professions related to this field. This is based on a report issued by Parliament that established certain measures, and it is really focused on scenic arts more than audiovisual arts, but it includes different supports with regard to employment, education, taxes, etc. Well, in many cases, the lack of stability and difficulties with regard to continuity have to be taken into account. Well, maybe there's been 3 months shooting, and maybe the tax system in Spain is not really adapted to these circumstances, and they expect you to have revenues during the whole year, right? So this is interesting. Well, to be able to end, I wanted to ask you about the situation from now until the next 5 years. So for the next 5 years, right? What's your opinion on that? Okay, yes, that's good. We have to open maybe the floor to the audience.
El micrófono por allí, por favor.
Primero.
First of all, I would like to congratulate Carlota and all the team of the Festival of Film by Women. I think this is very important to do, and I think that this is showing that things are changing. This was unthinkable when I was a student just a few decades ago, not to think about a film by Women Festival, but about an event like the one that we are attending here today, where we talk about moving forward in terms of the rights of women and advancing the rights of women in every field. So this is why I would like to congratulate you all, because this is a clear evidence of things, how things are changing. I wear two hats because I am the manager, the director of a master of film, of a film master in Madrid. But I also have my own company for producing movies, and we've been doing projects for 20 years already. These are projects made by women. And I have to say that it is extremely difficult to work in this field and to make movies. And it's true that this country's government and the ICAA are making a great effort in order to include further lines of aid to support women and women's presence in the film industry, as we have seen through the selective and global aids that you have shown us. It's true that the percentages are higher in the selective lines of aid, because this is what we can call the films for the poor, by the poor people, where everyone can have an opportunity. And it is true that we need to realize that the society and the public aids are two very different things. Society is not supporting us. When you go and ask for funding to shoot a documentary or any featured film, it is very difficult when you bring your project as a woman with different topics to receive the support that you need. So this is sort of a vicious cycle, because we need to really use the public aids in order to produce movies. This is why in the global AIDS line there is less representation of women. And this is why I have a question for the person who is here today representing the institutions. In our country, just as an example, and as a researcher that I am, I've worked in this type of research, and I have other colleagues doing this type of research who are studying the presence of the platforms, catalogs, such as Netflix's or HBO's, etc., who are operating freely in our country. What is the presence of women's work in their catalog? And we have to say that in most of these platforms, their presence does not go up to 10%. This means that the platforms operating in our country are not making any effort and are not implementing any measures to have a higher rate of women's presence in their catalogs. And I believe that in the same way that we have measures to bring the wages to the same standards and other measures promoting equality, maybe we should make different efforts so that other sectors, other institutions, other bodies can also promote and bet on women, because only with the public funding from the Ministry of Culture, this is not achievable. We might do a first project, a second project, but I know many women who feel already discouraged because they realize that out there in the market, it is very difficult to accomplish and to have a career in this field. And this is in the hands of the entities who are promoting the festivals and other activities like that, who are really pushing for women's work. But we need to have a very clear bet from the side of the public administrations to support women's presence. So my question is for the ICAA representative. Is there any sort of negotiation going on or conversations with the people who are in charge of producing more work, the platforms I'm talking about, and who are also capable of distributing the contents? So from the government, are there any conversations? Have you started any conversations in this sense? Because I know that in France, they're already demanding certain things from them. For instance, in France, they are asking for the restoration of films. Are we demanding something from them in this country? Well, thank you very much for your question. Well, the THEMA report that I mentioned before also analyzes the women's presence in the contents of the streaming platforms. I have to say that it is true that the figures we get are not good. The providers of these type of services, AV services, can opt to receiving public aids, whether it is with the coordination with independent producers, and they're all subject to everything that I have mentioned earlier, to all the requirements, all the quotas, all the measures that I mentioned. So this applies both to the services, AV services provider, or to independent producers. Now, the providers of AV communication services are forced to comply with the European Act for AV communication, and after the new reform of the law that was carried out in 2022, these are very specific obligations. They have a specific percentage that needs to be devoted to independent production, a certain percentage for Spanish or other official languages productions. So in my case, I'm not aware of any requirement of them having to comply with a certain quota or percentage of female or women's made production. This is a law that is changed by the legislative power, and it could be implemented at any given time. We have time for one more question, I believe.
Bueno, hay varios, sí.
No, yo solamente una cosa para Iris.
This is a question for Iris, if I may. If I understood well, the process in Austria was first to tell, then to increase the presence of women among the percentage of women filmmakers in order to reach equality. Then the budgets were improved up to reach the 50% threshold, and then to control the process throughout the shooting of the movie and up to the distribution and consumption of the movie. So I believe this is more or less a summary of what you have been doing in Austria. Has this been the case?
I did get the whole thing. So you were mentioning the four.
Yeah. If I did understood you, first you started in 2012 counting.
Yes.
Then in 2016 you have the equality for women directors, and then the equality for budgets. And then the fourth thing will be the control of the violence in the producing of the cinema production chain.
Yeah.
That's
more or less.
More or less is the rest.
This, yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to know the steps. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maybe we have time for another question.
Vale, ok.
Hello?
Sí.
Yeah. Perfect. Good evening. Thank you very much for this wonderful exposition. And I would just like to ask something about an earlier stage, which is to have the professionals, both men and women, but more concrete women right now in the sector. I mean, in literature, for instance, I think during the last years we've seen a lot of writers, women writing, in book fairs, winning prizes, and all over the world giving conferences. And I think that's something really important for people that are adolescents or just trying to know what to do with their lives, and see that it's possible for women to have these places in arts, in culture, that they did not have before. So my question would be, do you know, are you even practicing something regarding how to make professionals out of women in these first stages?
Wow.
¿Para quién era para mí la pregunta?
Was that question for me or?
I mean, like, maybe I wasn't so clear, sorry. In universities, in schools, is there something being done from your organizations to impulse women to know I can be a director, I can be a producer, I can be an actress and live out of it? What are you doing for to impulse that? Or is anything being done?
Bueno, promocionar películas de mujeres y que
Well, we promote movies made by women so that they can see that if women are directing movies, you can actually be a female director.
Académica de...
Yeah, but I mean from a more academic perspective. For instance, if there is a quota for studies in universities, no, the fact is that in cinema schools, academies, universities, there is a total equality. The thing is that after that, it's like an abyss because they never get the funding to do their first movies. We don't see any issue or unbalance within the studies for the film industry. I think that everything we have discussed here actually can help in that sense. If you see that there are DOPs or sound directors or lighting directors or movie makers who are women, at the end we are creating these role models. The fact that women are already occupying these spaces really promotes the interest among the younger generations. Maybe think that, oh, I hadn't thought of this, but I can actually become a woman DOP. There are different institutes and organizations where you can see all the professionals who are participating in the AV industry. There are many people that you can look up.
Because you said there is a gap when you leave the school. I have a little figure just to let you imagine how huge this gap is. In European schools, it's an average that was calculated in 2019. 1 out of 2 students is a woman. For the first short film, it's 1 out of 3 directors is a woman. For the first and the second feature, it's 1 out of 4. And for the third long feature and more, it's 1 out of 6. So this is really, just like you said, the huge gap. The cliff. And having more film produced, made by women, it's also more awards, more, and just the figures that you give at the beginning, they're terrible, saying that there have been so much years without awards. But just like Gina Davis said, if she can see it, she can be it. And so having more women having awards, it's also something that when you're a little kid watching the Oscar and there is not a single woman in the best directing section, it sends you a message. But now, if Chloé Zhao gets her Oscar, if Jane Campion gets her Oscar, it sends you also a message. It says, she can do it, maybe I can. And so in the lab, we're doing masterclass, podcast, we're sending it to students because we want to tell them, you can work in sound, in photography, in directing, and there have been so few examples. And those who have made the films, when you don't have the same budget, you don't have also the same visibility, you don't have the same actor, actress, you don't have the same sets, you don't have the same costumes, and you don't have the same price. It's also linked to budget, even if you can do amazing film without amazing budget, but it's also linked to budget. So having better parity and better inclusion within the industry would lead to more to be very to be empowered, because they want to join the industry, but then there are so many things stopping them. It's not really from their will that they're being excluded, I think.
Thank you very much, Liz. Well, I think we have really to wrap this. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed a lot. We could be talking for another hour. Gracias a todos por vuestra atención.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention. I see that the catalogs are already gone, but we have the lab catalogs that you can also get. And you know that at 7:30 we're starting another panel, and you're invited to stay. And we are going to leave the stage now so that the microphones can be ready for the next speakers. Thank you.